So here's a pretty serious fish tank. We have got a big Splendida, which is this fella here. We've got some really beautiful Synspilums. These are magnificent looking fish. Look at the head on that guy. They are absolutely beautiful. Got some parrots. We've got a big giant gourami. We've got a beautiful Jack Dempsey. We have got some monstrous silver sharks. I'm going to say that's the biggest silver shark I've ever seen. That is a monster. We've got an absolutely beautiful salmon cat.
Just pellets, wafers, and my starch. It's actually been the last 3 months I've been coming where they eat worms or...
What a cool tank. Some big bass in there. Very cool tank. You know, that's a long time. That's longer than they live in the wild. Yeah.
Same with the salmon catches. One day there, no joke, the body of the catfish was like, I used my fishing nets to get it out.
Now, one thing to be aware of over time, especially with such a massive aquarium as this one, is doing a spring clean. Yeah, that's a Baggerus catfish. Hemibaggerus catfish, that thing there. Very rare in Australia, that thing. So what happens over time is all the crap builds up underneath the rocks. And the problem with that is over time that can go what's called anoxic. So you can get bad bacteria forming underneath your rockwork. So something that I highly recommend is, even if it's just once a year, do a spring clean. Now what a spring clean basically is grab yourself a bunch of tubs or foam boxes, grab out your rocks, throw them in the foam box, doing a nice big water change, like probably the best part of a half. Get in with your gravel cleaner and really focus on cleaning up the back, and then put the rocks back in differently. That helps to entertain you, it helps to entertain the fish, and it helps to stop the formation of anoxic bacteria. Because the amount of crap that builds up through the back of the rocks that you can clearly see in this video is spectacular. So a spring clean is a really good idea. Now, we're not too happy with the clarity of this water, so there's various things we can do. We have tried this product, which seems to have made a little bit of a difference. Now, when we're not using this product, considering using polyfilter instead of filter wool is likely to have a good impact. Also, increasing the amount of biomass that's in the filter. So there's definitely marine pure there, but the more marine pure we have, particularly if we're registering any ammonia or nitrite, is going to help a little bit. And then good quality carbon is something else that's really going to help. So if we just put a nice big bag of good quality carbon, that's a really good way of improving our water quality. The other thing we can do to help is use products like Easy Life, because what Easy Life does is give the water a type positive charge. And what we don't want to do is feed low quality foods. So we really don't want to feed much of foods like that. And what we never want to do is leave our food open, which I don't think that is anyway. Yeah, there's the individual packing there. So you never want to leave food open. The other thing that we could do is put some coral bone. So this here, it'd be good to put that in a sack and put that in the filter, because that's going to help stabilize our pH. Now this stuff is your best friend. That's the best thing we can possibly use. That with some high grade carbon is a great way of keeping the water clean. I would be using the gravel cleaner and doing a spring clean as soon as possible. And away we go. It's a very cool tank. The other thing that will make a big difference is probiotic foods. So there are foods that have got probiotic bacteria in it, and this probiotic bacteria helps to now why is this not in the water? Oh, good. It's not. I thought, what have you done? Yeah, I told you have to get marine pure, and he's like, yeah, I've got it. No, but you gotta put it in the filter, not in the cupboard. So probiotic foods is the other thing that can really help, because what the probiotic foods do is that when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. So therefore that really helps to keep the tank clean. So when you do a spring clean, which means pull all the rocks out and clean under the rocks, it's really important that you put in a fresh polyfilter, because what very regularly happens is you start getting anoxic bacteria underneath the rocks, and if you release that at once, then you can discharge hydrogen sulfide that can actually kill your fish. Now the other thing, if hydrogen sulfide is slowly getting released because it's formed underneath this rock, that can also discolor the water, because you can get what's called a Gilvan tint, and a Gilvan tint means that there's a lot of biological activity in the water, and therefore you can actually that can discolor the water too. So doing a spring clean is a super good idea, and also making sure your lids are nice and clean, because sometimes water doesn't look clear if the lids are not clean, because the light shine through the lids, and if you've got algae on the lids, then you'll get a discolor in the water from the light themselves. So giving the lids a good clean is also really important. So in this tank, the synspilums are very regularly breeding, but all the babies get eaten by all these hungry mouths. So the odd baby finds their way down here, and they do actually survive. So if you do want the babies to have a better chance of surviving, you need to make nurseries. And the way you make nurseries is you get big clumps of fake plant, so the babies can get into the fake plant. Because cichlid babies are particularly smart, and if they've got a good little nursery that they can hide in, then they have a much better chance of survival. So frilly fake plants is how you'd make a nursery. Now, particularly with a tank this big, with fish this big, it's really important not to get tempted to overstock the tank. So as this tank is, I would say this tank is very nicely stocked. This is not what I would call overstocked for a tank this big, but considering a lot of these fish are not full grown, or some of them nowhere near full grown, getting more fish really wouldn't be advisable, because you do need to allow room for the fish to grow. Otherwise it will end up being overstocked. So the water in this aquarium at the moment, the pH is nice and alkaline. There's basically no ammonia. There's a tiny little bit of nitrite, and there's basically no nitrate, which is fairly amazing for this tank with this many fish. The KH is 7, which is a very good level, and the GH is sort of 7 or 8. So all in all, I'm very happy with these water tests. But in a perfect world, I'd probably raise the GH up a little bit more by adding a little bit of GH salts. And I'd like the nitrite to be 0, but I mean, that's pretty close, especially for animals this big. So adding some extra biomedia, even adding some extra coral bone as biomedia would definitely help. So a bit of extra biomedia would be a good idea. A spring clean would be a really great idea. Adding a big bulk of high-grade carbon would be a good idea, and replacing the polyfilter. So this UV tube here would need replacing, because you would need to replace them yearly. And the other thing is you want as slow water going through the UV as possible. So this amount that's going through now is okay, but I'd say that's definitely maximum. Because if you reduce the flow through the UV, then you're going to get increased contact time, and then you're going to get better results. So replacing this tube could also be something that actually helps the water clarity, because the UV will help make sure the water's nice and clear. And collectively, a bunch of little things is how we make sure the water is nice and clear. Now, one of the issues with fish like peacock bass is that they grow to become monstrous fish. And then what can happen is somebody buys this fish and they put it in a tank which is too small. And then the pheromones and phenols actually stunt their growth. So it makes them become basically like bonsai fish. And the problem with being a bonsai fish is that their growth can be stunted, and that will also have various negative consequences. So if you get a fish and you just can't fatten it up, then it can just be that it was grown up in a tank that was too small for it. And so even though now he's in a tank where he's got room, sometimes it's already too late. And you just don't know the answer to that. So this tank is now running at 23 degrees. Now, if you see any signs of white spot, you want to raise the temperature, even if it's just temporarily. But you can find that running a higher temperature, let's say 26 or 27, can increase their metabolism, make them hungrier, and sometimes actually make them more aggressive. So running the fish at a lower temperature can calm the fish. I know a lot of people that keep piranhas and that will often run them in colder water, and then they find that they're fine. If you run them in hotter water, sometimes they get more psycho. And 23 degrees is totally fine for these fish, assuming they don't get white spot. If they do get white spot, you need to put the temperature back up again, even if it's temporary. And sometimes that's catch-22, because it'll help you get rid of the white spot, but sometimes make the fish psycho, so therefore make them more likely to get white spot. So getting some extra catfish for cleaning the glass at the back isn't going to be a bad move. And then arranging like a really good razor blade on a stick is another way of trying to clean the glass. Otherwise, we can always send Josh in the tank and he can get in there and clean it all when he's in there.
2 months?
Yeah, right. So under all these rocks is an eel. And sometimes you buy an animal, and usually it's something you really want, and then it goes and hides under the bloody rocks, and then you never see it. I bet you it comes out at night time though. But that's no good to you, is it? The eel you have when you don't have an eel.